I used to think trading was a game of numbers, charts, indicators, signals, and algorithms. But behind those glowing screens was something deeper, something I didn't understand for years. I can still remember those nights. The blue light of my monitors was the only thing keeping me company. Coffee cups scattered like broken promises. The sound of market ticks echoed in the quiet of my apartment, like a heart that refused to sleep. Every candle on the chart felt like a breath held too long. Every trade a test of who I thought I was. I had read all the books, watched every video, bought every course. But no matter how many indicators I stacked on the screen, the result was always the same: a slow bleed of my account and a faster bleed of my confidence. There's a kind of silence that settles after a big loss. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of disbelief. The moment your mind whispers, "How did this happen again?" That silence had become my closest companion. It followed me from trade to trade, from day to night. I told myself it was bad luck. Then I blamed the brokers. Then the algorithms. Eventually, I blamed myself. But deep down, I didn't know what myself really meant anymore. I wasn't a trader. I was a gambler disguised as one. And I was tired. That's when I met him. He wasn't the kind of mentor you'd expect to find in the age of Twitter gurus and flashy Lamborghinis. He didn't sell courses. He didn't have a YouTube channel. He didn't even trade on multiple monitors. Just one old laptop with a cracked edge and a quiet confidence that felt like gravity. I met him by accident. A friend had dragged me to a small trading meetup in the city. I didn't want to go. I didn't believe anyone there would tell me something I hadn't already heard 1,000 times. But something about that night felt different. It was raining, softly, the kind of rain that makes you slow down, whether you want to or not. He was sitting in the corner of the cafe, staring at a single chart on his screen. No moving averages, no RSI, no MACD, just clean price candles and a few quiet lines drawn with precision. When I approached, he looked up, nodded once, and smiled. "Price tells a story," he said softly, as if continuing a conversation I hadn't yet started. "It always has. Most people just never learn to listen." That was the first lesson. Not about entries, or setups, or stop losses. It was about listening. He told me his name was Elias. And though he looked no older than 40, there was something in his eyes, a calmness, a weight, that told me he'd been through every storm a trader could face. We talked for hours that night. Or rather, he talked, and I listened. He told me that trading wasn't about predicting, it was about understanding. That the market wasn't random, but neither was it logical in the way people assumed. It was human. It was driven by fear and greed, hope and panic. The same emotions that had built and destroyed empires long before the first stock ever traded hands. "Look at the chart," he said, showing me a daily candlestick pattern. "Every bar is a heartbeat. Every movement is a collective emotion frozen in time. You don't trade the market. You trade human behavior. That's price action." I asked him why my trades always seemed to turn against me, even when the analysis made sense. He smiled. "Because you're trading to prove yourself right, not to understand what's happening. The market doesn't care about your opinion. It rewards those who learn to flow with it, not fight it." That night, he offered to teach me. Not for money, not for recognition, but on one condition. "You do exactly as I say," he told me. "No shortcuts, no ego. If you want to learn to see, then first you must forget everything you think you know." And I agreed. The next morning, he sent me a single chart, a blank one. "Your task," he said, "is to watch the market for a week. No trading, no drawing, just watch." I thought it was absurd. A week of just watching? But I did it. And in that week, something began to shift. I started noticing patterns I hadn't seen before. Not the kind of patterns you find in a textbook, but the ones that lived between the lines. The hesitation before a breakout. The exhaustion of a rally before it reversed. The rhythm of price breathing in and out. I realized that markets moved like people, with momentum, hesitation, bursts of emotion, and moments of doubt. On the 7th day, I messaged him. "I think I'm starting to see what you mean." He replied with just 3 words. "Now we begin." The first real lesson he gave me was about structure. Every chart, he said, is built on 3 things: trend, correction, and continuation. Your job is not to guess which one you're in. Your job is to read the transitions. He showed me how to look at swing highs and swing lows, how price builds stories through higher highs, lower lows, and the pauses in between. He called it the language of price. Most traders are deaf to it, he said. They want shortcuts. They want certainty. But this game is about probability and presence. If you can't stay present, you'll always chase what's already gone. At first, I didn't understand how something so simple could be powerful. I wanted magic indicators. He gave me silence and observation instead. One day, as we studied a chart of euro to US dollar, he asked, "What do you see here?" I hesitated. "A double top," I said. He shook his head gently. "No, that's what a book would say. Look deeper. What's the story behind it?" I looked again. The first top had formed with strong bullish candles. The second one was weaker. Wicks, hesitation, fading volume. He nodded. "Good. Now tell me what that means." "The buyers tried again," I said slowly. "But they weren't as strong this time." "Exactly," he said. "That's not a double top. That's exhaustion. That's where the story shifts. When you learn to read the story, you'll know what to do. Not because an indicator told you, but because you understand what's unfolding." For the first time, I began to feel like I wasn't guessing anymore. I was listening, observing, learning to see. But seeing wasn't enough. The next lesson was about control, not of the market, but of myself. "Trading," Elias said, "is a mirror. It shows you everything you don't want to see about yourself. Your impatience, your greed, your fear of being wrong. That's why most people can't last. Not because they can't learn strategy, but because they can't face themselves." He told me to keep a journal, not of trades, but of emotions. Before every trade, I had to write down what I felt. Excitement, anxiety, boredom, hope, everything. At first, it felt pointless. But within a month, I started noticing a pattern. My worst trades weren't bad because of analysis. They were bad because of emotion. Every time I felt desperate to make back losses, I forced trades. Every time I got too confident, I broke rules. Every time I was bored, I looked for action instead of waiting for opportunity. Elias smiled when I showed him my notes. "That's your edge," he said. "Not a setup, awareness. Once you know your patterns, you can stop repeating them. That's when you start trading like a professional." He taught me risk management the same way, not through numbers first, but through mindset. "Your stop loss isn't protection," he said. "It's discipline. It's your line in the sand that says, beyond this point, I stop being rational." Never move it. Never hope the market will turn for you. The moment you do, you're no longer trading, you're praying. He made me risk only 1% per trade. At first, I hated it. It felt slow, almost too cautious. But over time, I realized it wasn't about how much I made. It was about how long I survived. "Longevity," he said, "is the secret. Anyone can win today. Few can still be standing 5 years from now." Under his guidance, I began to rebuild my trading and my life from the ground up. The chaos in my charts turned into clarity. The noise in my head turned into stillness. And for the first time in years, I felt peace sitting in front of the screen. Trading stopped feeling like a battle. It started feeling like a conversation. The market would move, and I would listen. Sometimes I'd respond. Sometimes I'd just wait. There was no rush anymore. No panic. And that's when everything began to change. Elias always said the real battle in trading wasn't on the chart. It was in the mind, the quiet war between patience and impulse, clarity and chaos. For months, we studied together. Every morning before the markets opened, I'd meet him in that same corner cafe. He'd have a black coffee, no sugar, and that same old laptop with the cracked edge. Sometimes he didn't speak for the first 30 minutes. He'd just stare at the screen, waiting for something invisible to align. Then he'd say quietly, "Now watch." I learned to appreciate that stillness, that space before the storm. He called it alignment, the point when the market's rhythm and your state of mind move in harmony. One morning, he asked me to take a trade. Not on demo, real money, but small. He wanted to see how I handled it. It was euro to US dollar again, during London session. Price had broken above a previous high, then started to pull back. I remembered his words: structure, story, emotion. So I waited. I watched the candles print, small, hesitant, losing steam. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Every tick felt like it carried the weight of my past mistakes. Then the rejection candle formed. A long wick, clear as a confession. I took the short position. Stop above the high. Risk, 1%. For the first few minutes, price moved against me. Just a few pips, but enough to make my heart pound. The old fear began to rise. What if this is another loss? What if I'm wrong again? Elias said nothing. He just sipped his coffee, watching. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, the market turned. The next candle closed bearish. Then another. And another. My trade was in profit. Not much, but enough to see green on the screen. I wanted to close it, to lock it in. But I remembered what Elias always said. Don't trade not to lose. Trade when the story is complete. So I waited. And when price reached the prior demand zone, I closed half. Moved stop to break even. Then watched as the rest of the position rode down another 50 pips. When I finally exited, Elias smiled faintly. Now tell me, he said, what did you feel? I thought for a moment. Fear at first, I said. Then excitement. Then fear again. But also calm. Like I finally understood what I was seeing. He nodded. That's progress. The fear doesn't go away. It just becomes familiar. The trick is not to fight it, but to see through it. That day, I made my first consistent profit in months. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the shift inside. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't reacting to the market. I was dancing with it. But success has a way of testing you even harder than failure. The following week, I made 3 more winning trades. My confidence soared. And with confidence came the old ghost, greed. On Friday, I decided to go big. Same setup, same logic, but double the risk. Elias wasn't there that morning. I felt ready. Invincible. At first, the trade went perfectly. Green candles melted in my favor, profits climbing fast. I watched the unrealized numbers grow, and something inside me whispered, see? You figured it out. So I moved my stop, just a little further away, to give the trade room, I told myself. Then I added another position. Then another. And just like that, the market reversed. Hard. In 10 minutes, I lost everything I'd gained that week, and a little more. I sat there in silence, staring at the red numbers. My chest felt hollow. My hands were cold. When Elias saw me that evening, he didn't say a word. He just looked at me, the kind of look that sees right through you. Finally, he said, so what did you learn? I wanted to defend myself, to explain, to justify, but I couldn't. He already knew. I got greedy, I said quietly. He nodded. Greed is just fear wearing a mask. You were afraid of missing out, afraid of losing what you'd made, afraid of being wrong again. That's why you broke your rules. And that's why you lost. I lowered my head. I thought I was past that. You never get past it, he said. You just learn to recognize it faster. That night, he told me a story from his early trading days. He had once turned a small account into a fortune during a strong bull run. He thought he was invincible. He started over-leveraging, ignoring stops, adding to losers. Then one day, the market turned violently. He lost almost everything in a single week. I almost quit, he said softly. But that was the moment I realized what trading really is. It's not about making money. It's about mastering yourself. Every dollar you risk is a reflection of how much control you truly have. After that, I began to understand why he was so calm, why he could sit for hours without taking a single trade. He wasn't waiting for a signal. He was waiting for himself. The weeks that followed were different. I slowed down. I stopped forcing trades. I journaled every emotion, every thought. I noticed that my need for action was strongest when I was bored or anxious. So I filled that space with something else, reading charts from the past, studying structure, practicing patience like it was a skill. Elias once told me, the best traders aren't the smartest. They're the quietest. They don't need to prove anything, not to the market, not to anyone. He made me read my trading journal aloud one day, every mistake, every emotion. It was brutal, but hearing my own words made the truth impossible to ignore. I had been addicted to the rush, not the results. Trading had become my way of chasing validation, not mastery. So I changed. I deleted all my indicators. Clean charts only, just candles, structure, and volume. I began focusing on one pair, one time frame. Less noise, more depth. And strangely, as the charts became simpler, so did my mind. One morning, I asked him, how do you stay so calm when everything's moving so fast? He smiled. I don't stay calm. I return to calm. It's a practice. Every time the market tests me, I breathe, step back, and remind myself, nothing is personal. The market doesn't know me. It's not out to get me. It's just doing what it always does, testing who deserves to stay in the game. That stuck with me. From then on, I started treating every trade like a conversation, not a battle. If it didn't make sense, I didn't argue. If I lost, I didn't curse. I just listened, learned, and waited for the next setup. Slowly, the profits started to come, not in bursts, but in steady rhythm. Small wins, controlled losses. The equity curve began to rise, gently, like a tide. But more importantly, something inside me shifted. I no longer felt the constant tension in my chest. The late-night panic of trying to make it back disappeared. I was no longer chasing the market. I was flowing with it. Elias noticed. "You're starting to see the truth," he said one evening as we watched the candles move in silence. "What truth?" I asked. "That trading is just a reflection of life. You can't force growth. You can't rush mastery. You can only show up, pay attention, and let the lessons unfold. The same patience that makes you a good trader will make you a better human being." His words sank deep. I realized trading had taught me more about myself than any book or mentor ever could. It had forced me to face my fears, my impulsiveness, my desire for control. And in letting go of control, I finally found it. A few months later, he surprised me. He handed me a small notebook, old, worn, with handwritten notes inside. "These are my journals from when I was learning," he said. "Don't copy them. Read them. Feel the process." Inside were years of thoughts, observations, and reflections. Not trade entries or indicators, just philosophy. One line caught my attention. "The moment you stop needing the market to give you something, it starts to give you everything." That became my mantra. I started trading less, but earning more. I stopped measuring progress in profits and started measuring it in patience. And the more patient I became, the more consistent my results grew. Elias told me, "One day, you'll stop asking if your strategy works, because you'll realize it's not about the strategy. It's about the person executing it." He was right. I could feel it. Trading wasn't about signals or systems. It was about emotional mastery, self-awareness, and discipline. But just when I thought I had it figured out, life, like the market, decided to test me again. It was a Monday morning. News had just broken about unexpected rate changes. Volatility spiked. The charts exploded with motion, opportunity everywhere. I knew my plan: sit out during news, wait for structure. But greed whispered, "Just this once. You know what you're doing now." I entered. Too early. Too big. Within minutes, I was down. Then deeper. I moved my stop again. It was like watching an old version of myself come back to life. I could feel the panic rise, the need to fix it, the urge to add one more position. Then, almost instinctively, I heard Elias's voice in my mind. "Discipline isn't built when things are calm. It's built when everything in you wants to break it." I closed the trade. Took the loss. Small, but significant, not in money, but in meaning. Because for the first time, I didn't spiral. I didn't chase. I didn't fight the market or myself. I simply accepted. Later that day, Elias texted me, "You passed the real test today, the one that separates traders from survivors." I smiled at the screen, feeling a quiet sense of victory, because I knew what he meant. The victory wasn't in the trade. It was in the choice to stay disciplined when every emotion screamed otherwise. That night, I looked at my charts, clean, simple, calm, and I realized something. Trading wasn't about predicting the future. It was about managing the present, about making peace with uncertainty, about trusting the process, even when you couldn't see the outcome. That's when I knew. I was no longer chasing trades. I was becoming a trader. There's a stage in every trader's journey that feels like purgatory. You're no longer a beginner, but not yet a master. You understand the language of the market, but you still hesitate when it speaks. You know what to do, but your emotions whisper something else. Elias called it the season of drawdown. Not just financial drawdown, emotional drawdown. That place between progress and doubt, where every test feels personal and every candle questions your belief. He told me it was coming, but I didn't realize how hard it would hit. By then, I had been trading full-time for nearly a year. My results were steady. The small, consistent profits were stacking up. I felt confident, disciplined, grounded. So, when Elias told me it was time to trade solo, no guidance, no check-ins, just me and the charts, I thought I was ready. "Mastery isn't learned under supervision," he said. "It's proven in solitude." At first, everything went smoothly. The first 2 months were beautiful, consistent gains, calm mind, flawless execution. I thought I had crossed the bridge, that I was finally free of doubt. Then, without warning, the market changed. The same setups that worked before started failing. Clean structures broke without warning. Reversals came from nowhere. Losses began to pile up, not huge ones, but steady. Death by 1,000 cuts. At first, I stayed calm. I followed the rules. But as the red days added up, something inside me began to crack. Maybe the market's changed. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I've lost my touch. Those thoughts crept in like shadows. And once they did, discipline started to fade. I took trades I shouldn't have, chased setups that weren't clear, second-guessed my own analysis. Before I knew it, I was down nearly 10%. The numbers hurt, but what hurt more was the doubt. For the first time in months, I didn't trust myself. The silence of my trading room felt heavier than ever. Elias wasn't around. He had gone on a retreat, disconnected from the markets for a while. He told me beforehand, "Don't message me unless it's about life or death. You need to walk alone for a bit." And now, in that silence, I understood why. One night, I sat in front of my charts, staring at the same pair I'd been trading for weeks. The candles flickered on the screen, indifferent to my frustration. I wanted to scream at them, as if they'd listen. But then I remembered his words. The market doesn't know you. It doesn't owe you. It's not your enemy. It's your teacher. So I closed the charts, shut down the laptop, and walked outside. It was past midnight. The city was quiet. The streetlights reflected on the wet pavement, soft and golden. I took a deep breath and felt the tension begin to fade. I realized I had become obsessed again, not with winning, but with control. I had forgotten that drawdowns are part of the rhythm. Just as trends need corrections, traders need periods of struggle. Growth isn't constant, it's cyclical. When Elias returned weeks later, I told him everything. He listened quietly, nodding, then said, "Good. You needed that." I frowned. Needed it? I almost lost my mind. He smiled softly. "That's the point. You can't build real confidence until you've been tested. Anyone can follow rules when things go well. But true discipline shows up when nothing works, when you're bleeding and still refuse to abandon your process." Then he asked, "Did you revenge trade?" "No," I said. "I stopped trading for a week instead." His eyes lit up. "Then congratulations. That was your graduation." He explained that every trader goes through cycles of expansion and contraction, not just in profits, but in mindset. In expansion, everything flows easily. You trust the process. In contraction, you doubt everything, yourself most of all. But both are necessary, he said. You can't stay in expansion forever. It's the contraction that teaches you humility, patience, and respect for the market. Without that, you'd become reckless again. It made sense. The drawdown wasn't a punishment, it was training. So I changed how I saw it. I stopped measuring myself by wins and losses and started measuring by execution. If I followed my plan, that was success. If I managed risk, that was victory. If I stayed patient, that was mastery. The profits returned slowly but surely, not because I forced them, but because I stopped chasing them. I remember one trade vividly from that period, the kind that etches itself into your soul. It was on gold. The market had been ranging for days, building pressure. Most traders on forums were complaining, no direction, no opportunity. But Elias had taught me to see what others miss. Ranging markets, he once said, are where patience earns its paycheck. The longer it builds, the stronger it breaks. So I waited. Days went by, no entry, no setup, just quiet observation. Then one morning, as London opened, I saw it. A fake breakout above the range, rejection wick, volume spike. The story was clear, a trap, smart money shaking out the impatient. I shorted. Risk small, reward large. Price moved in my favor, slowly at first, then with conviction. It broke through the range, accelerated, then melted downward for hours. By the end of the session, I was up 6 times what I risked. But I didn't feel euphoria, just quiet gratitude. Because I knew that trade wasn't luck. It was patience rewarded, the kind of patience forged only through failure. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Discipline is doing what's right even when it doesn't work, yet." Elias read it later and said, "That's the essence of a trader. You've learned the rhythm." But the lessons didn't stop there. He began teaching me the philosophy that underpinned his entire method, something he called the law of flow. The market, he said, is like the ocean. You can't control the waves, but you can learn to surf. Every wave, every trend, pullback, and consolidation has a flow. When you fight it, you drown. When you align with it, you glide effortlessly. He showed me how to find that flow, not through indicators, but through observation. Identifying liquidity zones, momentum shifts, psychological levels where traders trap themselves through emotion. Every chart, he said, is a map of human weakness. The better you understand people, the better you'll understand price. It wasn't just technical. It was human, spiritual almost. He said the secret wasn't to predict, it was to participate, to move with awareness, not attachment. And that's what changed me. Trading stopped being about getting it right. It became about aligning with reality as it unfolded. One evening, as the sun set behind the skyline, Elias and I sat outside the cafe in silence. The sky glowed orange, and the world felt still. He said, "You know, people think trading is about freedom, financial freedom, time freedom. But the real freedom is internal. When the outcome no longer controls your peace, that's when you're truly free." I looked at him, realizing he wasn't talking just about trading anymore. He was talking about life. In that moment, I understood something deeper. The same patience that kept me from overtrading was the patience that made me kinder. The same discipline that made me set stops made me set boundaries. The same awareness that read price action helped me read people and myself. Trading had stopped being a career. It had become a mirror. Elias began pulling back, letting me operate on my own. Sometimes I'd go weeks without seeing him. When we did meet, we barely talked about markets anymore. We talked about philosophy, focus, meaning. One day, I asked him, "Why did you choose to teach me?" He smiled faintly. "Because someone once did the same for me. And because I saw in you what I once saw in myself. The hunger to win, and the pain of misunderstanding what winning really means." "What does it mean?" I asked. He looked toward the horizon. "To trade without fear. To live without attachment. To trust without needing proof." Those words stayed with me. By then, my days had grown quieter. No more frantic entries. No more emotional chaos. I'd wake up, analyze, plan, and wait. Sometimes I'd take one trade a week. Sometimes none. But every decision felt deliberate. Every move had intention. I started teaching others, too. Not for profit, but to share the principles that saved me. I realized that the best way to reinforce wisdom is to pass it on. Because in teaching, you relive your own journey, the pain, the lessons, the growth, and it grounds you deeper into humility. Elias once told me, "Never teach to be admired. Teach to remind yourself of what matters." And he was right. By the end of that year, something had changed in me completely. I wasn't chasing results anymore. I wasn't checking balance daily or obsessing over equity curves. My joy came from execution, from clarity, from that stillness before the trade where everything feels aligned. And that's when I realized this wasn't just trading anymore. It was meditation in motion, a practice of awareness and surrender. Trading had become the mirror through which I learned to see life clearly. Price action wasn't just about markets, it was about moments. Support and resistance weren't just levels, they were lessons in balance. Risk and reward weren't just ratios. They were reflections of how much you were willing to trust. The market had become my teacher, and Elias, my guide, had given me the only method that truly works. The one that begins and ends within. It had been 3 years since the night I first met Elias. 3 years since the rain, the cafe, and the quiet voice that spoke of stories hidden inside candles. I was no longer the same person who once chased trades like a desperate gambler. The chaos was gone, replaced by rhythm, structure, calm. The charts no longer intimidated me. They spoke, and I listened. The transformation was subtle at first, then deep. My days had become slower, simpler. Morning coffee, chart review, mindfulness. No rush, no noise, just flow. The funny thing was, as my inner world settled, my outer results exploded. Consistency, clarity, confidence, all byproducts of something invisible, peace. Elias always said trading wasn't about making money. It was about earning peace of mind through understanding. And now, I finally understood what he meant. One evening, I received a message from him. "Come by the cafe tomorrow. There's something we need to talk about." When I arrived, he was already there. Same table, same black coffee, same quiet smile. But something was different in his eyes, a softness I hadn't seen before. He gestured for me to sit. Then he said, "You've learned everything I can teach you." I paused, unsure what to say. "Everything." He nodded. "The rest, you'll learn from silence." He explained that mentorship, like trading, had its own life cycle. At some point, the teacher must step back so the student can truly walk alone. And even though I knew this moment would come, it hit me harder than I expected. "So this is it?" I asked. He smiled gently. "Not the end, just the point where the river becomes the ocean." We sat in silence for a while, the hum of the cafe filling the air. Then he asked me, "What have you learned?" I thought about that for a long moment. Then I said, "I've learned that trading isn't about prediction, but observation. That losses are tuition, not punishment. That the market rewards patience more than intelligence. That the real enemy isn't volatility, it's my own impatience. And that freedom doesn't come from profit, but from peace." He smiled, eyes glimmering. "Then you've learned the truth." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges. It looked old, handwritten, the ink faded slightly. "Read it," he said. The note was short, just a few lines. "The market is a mirror. When you master yourself, the reflection becomes clear. Until then, all you'll see is distortion." I looked up. "Did you write this?" He shook his head. "My mentor did. He gave it to me the day I stopped being a student." He smiled faintly. "Now it's yours." I folded the paper carefully, realizing I was holding something that had passed through generations of traders. Wisdom carried not in systems or signals, but in spirit. We talked a little more that night, not about setups or risk, but about life. About balance, health, love, and time. He told me, "In the end, trading teaches you how to live, how to wait, how to act, and how to let go." As we parted, he said something I'll never forget. "Remember, the market never punishes. It reveals. And once you stop resisting what it shows you, you'll finally be free." The months that followed felt different. The cafe felt emptier without him, but I could still hear his voice in my mind every time I traded. Every chart became a conversation between my old self and the one I had become. There were still losses, there always are, but I no longer saw them as setbacks. Each loss was feedback, a whisper reminding me to stay humble. One morning, I watched price sweep through a key level, trap traders on the wrong side, and reverse sharply. A classic move Elias had taught me to spot. I entered calmly, risk defined, target clear. The trade played out beautifully. Textbook. But when I closed it, I didn't celebrate. I just nodded quietly, whispering to the screen, "Thank you for the lesson." Because that's what trading had become, a conversation between humility and mastery. Later that day, I found myself rereading my old journals. The pages were filled with emotions: anger, hope, greed, doubt. I saw the evolution of my handwriting, from messy desperation to neat precision. It was like watching a younger version of myself learn to breathe. I realized something powerful then. The market had never changed. Only I had. The setups, the candles, the volatility, they were all the same. What changed was the lens through which I viewed them. I stopped looking for certainty and started embracing probability. I stopped chasing results and started cultivating consistency. And in that shift, I found peace. Because the truth is, mastery isn't about control. It's about surrender. It's the quiet confidence of knowing that win or lose, you're aligned with your process. It's the serenity of accepting that uncertainty isn't the enemy. It's the essence of the game. A year passed before I saw Elias again. I had been traveling, trading from different cities, living the kind of life I once only dreamed about. But more than the freedom, it was the stillness that I cherished. No rush, no pressure, just rhythm and flow. When I returned to the city, I went back to that same cafe, not expecting to find him there. But he was older, maybe a bit grayer, but still radiating that same calm energy that had once anchored me. He looked up as I approached. "Back from the world?" he said with a grin. "Back from myself?" I replied. He laughed. "You look different." "I feel different," I said. "I don't trade for excitement anymore. I trade for alignment." He nodded approvingly. That's when you know you've crossed the line from trader to artist. We talked for hours, about markets, yes, but mostly about meaning. He told me he'd stop trading as often. "Not because I can't," he said, "but because I no longer need to." I understood. There's a moment when trading stops being a pursuit and becomes a meditation, a way to understand yourself through the movement of the world. Before we parted, I asked him one last question. What's the one thing every trader should remember? He smiled, that same knowing smile from the very first day we met. The market doesn't pay you to predict. It pays you to wait. Every fortune ever made in trading was earned by someone who learned to be still when everyone else was restless. I nodded, and in that moment, I knew the lesson was complete. Now, years later, when people ask me how I became consistent, how I finally made it, I tell them this story. About a mentor who traded on an old laptop with a cracked edge, about charts stripped of noise, about lessons written not in textbooks, but in silence. I tell them the truth that no one wants to hear, that the secret method isn't a pattern or a signal, it's presence. It's learning to sit with uncertainty until clarity emerges. It's mastering patience until time itself becomes your ally. It's understanding that your greatest opponent is never the market. It's the version of yourself that refuses to wait. Because in the end, trading isn't about chasing wealth. It's about becoming the kind of person who deserves it. I've learned that real success is invisible. It's the calm before you click buy, the breath you take before moving your stop, the quiet trust that comes from knowing you don't need to force anything. Every trade, every loss, every win, they're just waves on the surface. The ocean beneath them is you. Still, deep, infinite. And that's the truth my mentor passed down. That's the secret that actually wins. Epilogue, the candle's light. Sometimes I still find myself in that cafe, watching new faces come and go. Young traders, full of energy and confusion, talking about setups, signals, and secret indicators. I smile, remembering who I once was. And sometimes, when I see one who reminds me of myself, tired eyes, restless spirit, desperate for answers, I'll lean over and say softly, "Price tells a story. It always has. You just have to learn to listen." And in that moment, I hear Elias's voice again, calm, patient, timeless, echoing through me like a quiet rhythm that never ends. Because mentorship doesn't stop when the teacher leaves. It lives on in the lessons you embody, in the peace you carry, in the patience you pass down. And maybe that's the real legacy of every great trader. Not the profits they made, but the wisdom they left behind. The truth about price action isn't hidden in data or formulas. It's written in silence, in discipline, in stillness. It's in the courage to wait, the humility to lose, and the grace to begin again. Trading is just the mirror. Mastery is what you see reflected back. And when the noise fades, when the chart's quiet, when all the lessons finally settle, what remains is something simple, something eternal, something that can't be taught, only lived. Patience, presence, peace. That's the method that actually wins. That's the secret my mentor passed down. And if you truly listen, it will become yours too.